The fall of Satan. The extraordinary qualities with which Adam was blessed, physical and spiritual as well, aroused the envy of the angels. They attempted to consume him with fire, and he would have perished had not the protecting hand of God rested on him, establishing peace between him and the heavenly host. In particular, Satan was jealous of the first man, and his evil thoughts finally led to his fall. After Adam had been endowed with a soul, God invited all the angels to come and pay him reverence and homage. Satan, the greatest of the angels, with 12 wings instead of 6 like all the others, refused to pay heed to God's request, saying, "You created us angels from the splendor of the Shekinah, and now you command us to cast ourselves down before the creature you fashioned out of the dust of the ground." God answered, "Yet this dust of the ground has more wisdom and understanding than you." Satan demanded a trial of wit with Adam, and God agreed, saying, "I have created beasts, birds, and reptiles. I shall have them all come before you and before Adam. If you are able to give them names, I shall command Adam to show honor to you, and you will rest next to the Shekinah of my glory. But if not, and Adam calls them by the names I have assigned them, then you will be subject to Adam, and he shall have a place in my garden and cultivate it." Thus spoke God, and he went to paradise, Satan following him. When Adam beheld God, he said to his wife, "Come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker." Now Satan attempted to assign names to the animals. He failed with the first 2 that presented themselves, the cow and the horse. God led 2 others before him, the camel and the donkey, with the same result. Then God turned to Adam and questioned him regarding the names of the animals, framing his questions so that the first letter of the first word was the same as the first letter of the name of the animal. Thus Adam divined the proper name, and Satan was forced to acknowledge the superiority of the first man. Nevertheless, he broke out in wild outcries that reached the heavens, and he refused to do homage to Adam as he had been told. The host of the angels led by him did likewise, in spite of the urgent protests of Michael, who was the first to prostrate himself before Adam in order to show a good example to the other angels. Michael addressed Satan, "Give adoration to the image of God. If not, the Lord will break out in wrath against you." Satan replied, "If he breaks out in wrath against me, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will be like the Most High." At once, God flung Satan and his host out of heaven, down to the earth. And from that moment dates the hatred between Satan and man. Woman. When Adam opened his eyes the first time and beheld the world about him, he broke into praise of God. "How great are your works, O Lord!" But his admiration for the world surrounding him did not exceed the admiration all creatures conceived for Adam. They took him to be their creator, and they all came to offer him adoration. But he spoke, "Why do you come to worship me? No, you and I together will acknowledge the majesty and the might of him who has created us all. The Lord reigns," he continued. "He is clothed with majesty." Even the angels thought Adam the Lord of all, and they were about to salute him with "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts," when God caused sleep to fall upon him, and then the angels knew that he was but a human being. The purpose of Adam's sleep was to give him a wife, so that the human race might develop and all creatures recognize the difference between God and man. When the earth heard what God had resolved to do, it began to tremble and quake. It said, "I have not the strength to provide for Adam's descendants." But God pacified it with the words, "You and I together will find food for the herd." Accordingly, time was divided between God and the earth. God took the night, and the earth took the day. Refreshing sleep nourishes and strengthens man. While man sleeps, the earth brings forth produce with the help of God, who waters it. Yet, man must work the earth to earn his food. The divine resolution to give a companion to Adam met with the wishes of Adam, who had been overcome by a feeling of isolation when the animals came to him in pairs to be named. To banish his loneliness, Lilith was first given to Adam as wife. Like him, she had been created out of the dust of the ground, but she remained with him only a short time because she insisted on enjoying full equality with her husband. She derived her rights from their identical origin. With the help of the ineffable name, which she pronounced, Lilith flew away from Adam and vanished in the air. Adam complained before God that his wife had deserted him, and God sent forth 3 angels to capture her. They found her in the Red Sea, and they tried to make her go back with the threat that, unless she went, she would lose 100 of her demon children daily by death. But Lilith preferred the death of her children to living with Adam. She takes her revenge by injuring baby boys during the first night of their life, while baby girls are exposed to her wicked designs until they are 20 days old. The only way to ward off the evil is to attach an amulet bearing the names of her 3 angel captors to the children, for such has been the agreement between them. The woman destined to become the true companion of man was taken from Adam's body, for only when like is joined to like is the union unbreakable. The creation of woman from man was possible because Adam originally had 2 faces, which were separated at the birth of Eve. When God was at the point of making Eve, he said, "I will not make her from the head of man, lest she carry her head high in arrogant pride, not from the eye, lest she be wanton-eyed, not from the ear, lest she be an eavesdropper, not from the neck, lest she be insolent, not from the mouth, lest she be a tattler, not from the heart, lest she be inclined to envy, not from the hand, lest she be a meddler, and not from the foot, lest she be a gadabout. I will form her from a chaste part of the body, and to every limb and organ as he formed it, God said, Be chaste, be chaste. Nevertheless, in spite of the great caution used, woman has all the faults God tried to obviate. The daughters of Zion were haughty and walked with stretched forth necks and wanton eyes. Sarah was an eavesdropper in her own tent when the angel spoke with Abraham. Miriam was a talebearer accusing Moses. Rachel was envious of her sister Leah. Eve held out her hand to take the forbidden fruit, and Dinah was a gadabout. The physical formation of woman is far more complicated than that of man, as it must be for the function of childbearing, and likewise the intelligence of woman matures more quickly than the intelligence of man. Many of the differences between the 2 sexes must be attributed to the fact that man was formed from ground and woman from bone. Women need perfumes, while men do not. Dust of the ground remains the same no matter how long it is kept. Flesh, however, requires salt to keep it in good condition. The voice of women is shrill, not so the voice of men. When soft vegetables are cooked, no sound is heard, but let a bone be put into the pot, and at once it crackles. A man is easily placated, not so a woman. A few drops of water suffice to soften a clod of earth. A bone stays hard. The man must ask the woman to be his wife, and not the woman the man to be her husband, because it is man who has sustained the loss of his rib, and he sallies forth to make good his loss. The very differences between the sexes in garb and social forms go back to the origin of man and woman for certain reasons. Woman covers her hair in token of Eve's having brought sin to the world. She tries to hide her shame. Women precede men in a funeral dirge and wail the loudest, because it was woman who brought death into the world. And the commands addressed to women alone are connected with the history of Eve. Adam was the main offering of the world, and Eve defiled it. As a result, all women are commanded to separate an offering from the dough, and because woman extinguished the light of man's soul, she is bidden to kindle the Sabbath light. Adam was first made to fall into a deep sleep before the rib for Eve was taken from his side. Had he watched her creation, she would not have awakened love in him. To this day it is true that men do not appreciate the charms of women who they have known and observed since childhood. Indeed, God had created a wife for Adam before Eve, but he would not have her because she had been made in his presence. Knowing well all the details of her formation, he was repelled by her. But when he roused himself from his profound sleep and saw Eve before him in all her surprising beauty and grace, he exclaimed, "This is she who caused my heart to throb many a night." Yet he discerned at once what the nature of woman was. She would, he knew, seek to carry her point with man either by entreaties and tears or by flattery and caresses. He said, therefore, "This is my never-silent bell." The wedding of the first couple was celebrated with pomp and circumstance never repeated in the whole course of history. God himself, before presenting her to Adam, attired and adorned Eve as a bride. He appealed to the angels, saying, "Come, let us perform services of friendship for Adam and his helpmate, for the world rests on friendly services, and they are more pleasing in my sight than the sacrifices Israel will offer on the altar." The angels accordingly surrounded the marriage canopy, and God pronounced the blessings on the bridal couple. The angels then danced and played musical instruments before Adam and Eve, who much enjoyed their 10 bridal chambers of gold, pearls, and precious stones, which God had lovingly prepared for them. Adam and Eve in Paradise. The Garden of Eden was the abode of the first man and woman, and the souls of all men must pass through it after death, before they reach their final destination. The souls of the departed must go through 7 portals before they arrive in heaven. There the souls of the pious are transformed into angels, and there they remain forever, praising God and feasting their sight on the glory of the Shekinah. The first portal is the cave of Machpelah, in the vicinity of Paradise, which is under the care and supervision of Adam. If the soul that presents herself at the portal is worthy, he calls out, "Make room, you are welcome." The soul then proceeds until she arrives at the gate of Paradise, guarded by the cherubim and the flaming sword. If she is not found worthy, she is consumed by the sword. Otherwise, she receives a pass, which admits her to the earthly paradise. There is a pillar of smoke and light extending from paradise to the gate of heaven, and it depends on the character of the soul whether she can climb upward and reach heaven. The third portal, Zebul, is at the entrance of heaven. If the soul is worthy, the guard opens the portal and admits her. Michael presents her to God and conducts her to the 7th portal, Arabat, where the souls of the pious, changed to angels, praise the Lord and feed on the glory of the Shekinah. In paradise are the tree of life and the tree of knowledge, the latter forming a hedge about the former. Only he who has cleared a path for himself through the tree of knowledge can come close to the tree of life, which is so huge it would take a man 500 years to traverse the distance equal to the diameter of the trunk, and no less vast is the space shaded by its branches. From beneath it flow the waters that irrigate the whole earth, parting into 4 streams, the Ganges, the Nile, the Tigris, and the Euphrates. But it was only during the days of creation that the realm of plants looked to the waters of the earth for nourishment. Later on, God made the plants depend on the rain, the upper waters. The clouds rise from earth to heaven, where water is poured into them as from a faucet. The plants began to feel the effect of the water only after Adam was created. Although they had been brought forth on the 3rd day, God did not permit them to appear above the surface of the earth until man had been created. Paradise, being as it was not necessary for Adam to work the land. True, the Lord God put man into the Garden of Eden to dress it and keep it, but that only means he is to study the Torah there and fulfill the commandments. There were 6 commandments which every human being is expected to heed. Man should not worship idols, blaspheme God, commit murder, incest, nor theft, and all generations have the duty of instituting measures of law and order. One more such command there was, but it was a temporary injunction. Adam was to eat only the green things of the field. This prohibition against the use of animals for food was revoked in Noah's time, after the deluge. Nevertheless, Adam was not deprived the enjoyment of meat. Though he was not permitted to slaughter animals, the angels brought him meat and wine, serving him like attendants. And as the angels ministered to his wants, so also the animals. They were wholly under his dominion. He and Eve could, if they wanted, feed them right out of their hands. In all respects, the animal world had a different relation to Adam from the relation to his descendants. Not only did they know the language of man, but they respected the image of God, and they feared the first couple, all of which changed into the opposite after the fall of man. The fall of man. Among the animals, the serpent was notable. He had the most excellent qualities, some of which resembled man. Like man, he stood upright on 2 feet, and in height he was equal to the camel. Had it not been for the fall of man, which brought such great misfortune, 1 pair of serpents would have sufficed to perform all the work man had to do, and besides, they would have supplied him with silver, gold, gems, and pearls. As a matter of fact, it was the variability of the serpent that led to his ruin, and also of man's. His superior mental gifts caused him to become an infidel. It likewise explains his envy of man, especially of his conjugal relations. Envy made him meditate ways and means of bringing about the death of Adam. He was too well acquainted with the character of Adam to attempt to exercise tricks of persuasion upon him, so he approached the woman, knowing that women are easily beguiled. The conversation with Eve was cunningly planned. She could not but be caught in the trap. The serpent began, "Is it true that God has said, 'You shall not eat of every tree in the garden'?" Eve said, "We may eat of all the fruit of the trees in the garden, except that which is in the middle of the garden, and that one we may not even touch, lest we be stricken with death." She said this because in his zeal to guard her against breaking the divine command, Adam had forbidden Eve to even touch the tree, though God had mentioned only the eating of the fruit. So it remains a truth, what the proverb says, "Better a wall 10 hands high that stands, than a wall 100 ells high that cannot stand." It was Adam's exaggeration that afforded the serpent the possibility of persuading Eve to taste of the forbidden fruit. The serpent pushed Eve against the tree and said, "You see, touching the tree has not caused your death, so it won't hurt to eat the fruit of the tree. Nothing but God's envy has prompted the prohibition, for as soon as you eat of it, you shall be as God. As He creates and destroys worlds, so will you have the power to create and to destroy. As He kills and revives, so will you have the power to kill and revive. He Himself first ate of the fruit of the tree, and then He created the world. That's why He forbids you to eat it, lest you create other worlds and overrule Him. He just doesn't want the competition. Furthermore, have you noticed that every creature has dominion over the creature fashioned before itself? The heavens were made on the first day, and they are kept in place by the firmament made on the second day. The firmament, in turn, is ruled by the plants, the creation of the third day, for they take up all the water of the firmament. The sun and the other celestial bodies, which were created on the fourth day, have power over the world of plants. They can ripen their fruits and flourish only through their influence. The creation of the fifth day, the animal world, rules over the celestial spheres. Witness the Ziz, which can darken the sun with its wings. But you are masters of the whole creation, because you were the last to be created, Now, eat of the fruit of the tree and become independent of God, before he brings forth still other creatures to rule over you." To give due weight to these words, the serpent began to shake the tree violently, bringing down the fruit. He ate some of it, saying, "It is not killing me, so it will not kill you." Eve said to herself, "So, all that Adam has commanded me is lies." And she determined to follow the advice of the serpent. Yet she could not bring herself to disobey the command of God totally. She made a compromise with her conscience. First, she ate only the outside of the skin of the fruit, and then, seeing that death did not fell her, she ate the fruit itself. As soon as she finished, she saw the angel of death before her. Expecting her end to come immediately, she resolved to make Adam eat of the forbidden fruit also, lest he marry another wife after her death. It required tears and lamentations on her part to persuade Adam to take the dreadful step. Not yet satisfied, she gave the fruit to all other living beings, that they too might be subject to death. All ate, and they all are mortal, with the exception of the phoenix, who refused the fruit with the words, "Is it not enough that you have sinned against God and have brought death to others? Must you come to me and seek to persuade me to disobey God's command, that I may eat and die also? I will not do it." A heavenly voice was then heard to say to Adam and Eve, "To you was the command given. You did not heed it, and you tried to persuade the phoenix. He was steadfast, and he feared me, although I gave him no command. Therefore he shall never taste death, neither he nor his descendants. They all shall live forever in paradise." Adam then spoke to Eve, "Did you give me of the tree of which I forbade you to eat?" "You did give it to me. That is why my eyes are opened, and the teeth in my mouth are set on edge." Eve made answer, "So may the teeth of all living beings be set on edge." The first result was that Adam and Eve became naked. Before, their bodies had been overlain with a thick skin and enveloped with a cloud of glory. No sooner had they violated the command given them than the cloud of glory and the thick skin dropped from them, and they stood in their nakedness, ashamed. Adam tried to gather leaves from the trees to cover part of their bodies, but he heard one tree after the other say, "There is the thief that deceived his Creator. No, the foot of pride shall not come against me, nor the hand of the wicked touch me. Hence, take no leaves from me." Only the fig tree granted him permission to take of its leaves. This was because the fig was the forbidden fruit itself. Adam had the same experience as that prince who seduced one of the maidservants in the palace. When the king, his father, chased him out, he vainly sought a refuge with the other maidservants, but only she who had caused his disgrace would grant him assistance. The punishment. As long as Adam stood naked, trying to figure out how to escape from his embarrassment, God did not appear to him, for, as the saying goes, leave a man to himself when he is wounded and humiliated. God waited until Adam and Eve had covered themselves with fig leaves, but even before God spoke to him, Adam knew what was impending. He heard the angels announce, "God is moving towards those in paradise." He also heard what the angels were saying to one another about his fall, and what they were saying to God. In astonishment, the angels exclaimed, "What? He still walks about in paradise? He is not yet dead?" Whereon God, "I said to him, In the day that you eat thereof, you will surely die. Now, you know not what manner of day I meant, one of my days of 1,000 years, or one of your days. I will give him one of my days. He shall have 930 years to live, and 70 to leave to his descendants." When Adam and Eve heard God approaching, they hid among the trees, which would not have been possible before the fall. Before he committed his sin, Adam's height was from the heavens to the earth, but afterward it was reduced to 100 ells. Another consequence of his sin was the fear Adam felt when he heard the voice of God. Before, it had not bothered him in the least. Now, it was as Adam said, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid." God replied, "Before you were not afraid. Why are you afraid now?" God refrained from reproaches at first, but he asked, "Where are you, Adam?" For he wanted to teach man a rule of polite behavior, never to enter the house of another without announcing himself. It cannot be denied the words, "Where are you?" were pregnant with meaning. They intended to bring home to Adam the vast difference between his latter and his former state, between his supernatural size then and his shrunken size now, between the lordship of God over him then and the lordship of the serpent over him now. At the same time, God wanted to give Adam the opportunity of repenting of his sin. If he had, he would have received divine forgiveness. But, so far from repenting of it, Adam slandered God and uttered blasphemies against him. When God asked him, "Have you eaten of the fruit that I commanded you not to eat?" he did not confess his sin, but excused himself with the words, "O Lord of the world, as long as I was alone I did not fall into sin, but as soon as this woman came to me, she tempted me." God replied, "I gave her to you as a helpmate. You are ungrateful when you accuse her, saying, 'She gave me of the tree.' You should not have obeyed her, for you are the leader, not her." God, who knows all things, had foreseen exactly this. He had not created Eve until Adam had asked him for a helpmate. So it was somewhat Adam's own fault. As Adam tried to shift the blame from himself, so also Eve. She, like her husband, did not confess her sin and beg for pardon, which would have been granted. Gracious as God is, he did not pronounce the doom on Adam and Eve until they showed themselves stiff-necked. Not so with the serpent. God inflicted the curse on the serpent without hearing his defense, for the serpent is a villain, and the wicked love to argue. If God had questioned him, the serpent would have answered, "If you gave them a command, how could I contradict it? Why did they obey me and not you?" Therefore, God did not even enter into an argument with the serpent, but simply decreed the following 10 punishments. The mouth of the serpent was closed, his power of speech taken away. His hands and feet were hacked off, the earth was given him as food. He must suffer great pain in shedding his skin. Hatred is to exist between him and man. If he eats the choicest greens or drinks the sweetest beverages, they all change to dust in his mouth. The pregnancy of the female serpent lasts 7 years. Men shall seek to kill him as soon as they catch sight of him. Even in the future world, where all beings will be blessed, he will not escape the punishment decreed for him. Furthermore, God spoke to the serpent, "I created you to be king over all animals, cattle and beasts of the field alike, but you were not satisfied. Therefore, you will be cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field. I created you of upright posture, but you were not satisfied. Therefore, you will go on your belly. I created you to eat the same food as man, but you were not satisfied. Therefore, you will eat dust all the days of your life." You tried to cause the death of Adam in order to take his wife. Therefore, I will put hatred between you and the woman. How true it is, he who lusts after what is not his due, not only does he not attain his desire, but he also loses what he has. As angels were present when the doom was pronounced on the serpent, for God had convoked a Sanhedrin of 71 angels when he sat in judgment, so the execution against the serpent was entrusted to them. They descended from heaven and chopped off his hands and feet. His suffering was so great that his agonized cries, could be heard from one end of the world to the other. The verdict against Eve also consisted of 10 curses, the effect of which is noticeable to this day in the physical, spiritual, and social state of woman. It was not God himself who announced her fate to Eve. The only woman with whom God ever spoke was Sarah. In the case of Eve, he made use of the services of an interpreter. Finally, the punishment of Adam was also 10-fold. He lost his celestial clothing. In sorrow he was to earn his daily bread. The food he ate was to be turned from good into bad. His children were to wander from land to land. His body was to exude sweat. He was to have an evil inclination. In death, his body was to be eaten by worms. Animals were to have power over him, in that they could kill him. His days were to be few and full of trouble, and in the end he was to render account for all his doings on earth. These 3 sinners were not the only ones to have punishment dealt out to them. The earth fared no better, for it had been guilty of various misdemeanors. In the first place, it had not entirely heeded the command of God given on the 3rd day, to bring forth tree of fruit. What God had desired was a tree the wood of which was to be as pleasant to the taste as the fruit thereof. The earth, however, produced a tree bearing fruit, the tree itself not being edible. Again, the earth did not do its whole duty in connection with the sin of Adam. God had appointed the sun and the earth witnesses to testify against Adam in case he committed a trespass. The sun, accordingly, had grown dark the instant Adam became guilty of disobedience. But the earth, not knowing how to take notice of Adam's fall, disregarded it altogether. So the earth had to suffer a 10-fold punishment. Independent before, she now had to wait to be watered by the rain. Sometimes the fruits of the earth fail. The grain she brings forth is stricken with rot and mildew. She must produce all sorts of noxious vermin. She was to be divided into valleys and mountains. She must grow barren trees, bearing no fruit. Thorns and thistles sprout from her. Much is sown in the earth, but little is harvested. In time to come, the earth will have to disclose her blood, and shall no more cover her slain, and finally she shall, one day, wax old like a garment. When Adam heard the words, "Thorns and thistles shall it bring forth," concerning the ground, a sweat broke out on his face, and he said, "What? Shall I and my cattle eat the same food?" The Lord had mercy on him and spoke, "In view of the sweat on your face, you will eat bread." The earth is not the only thing that was made to suffer through the sin of Adam. The same fate overtook the moon. When the serpent seduced Adam and Eve and exposed their nakedness, they wept bitterly, and with them wept the heavens, the sun, and the stars, and all created beings and things up to the throne of God. The very angels and the celestial beings were grieved by the sin of Adam. When the moon alone laughed, God grew angry with her again, and obscured her light. Instead of shining steadily like the sun the whole year, she grows old quickly, and must be born and reborn again and again. The callous conduct of the moon offended God, not only by comparison with all other creatures, but because he himself was full of pity for Adam and his wife. He made clothes for them out of the skin ripped from the serpent. He would have done even more. He would have permitted them to remain in paradise, if only they had been penitent. But they refused to repent, and they had to leave, or their godlike understanding might urge them to ravage the tree of life and learn to live forever. As it was, when God dismissed them from paradise, he did not allow the divine quality of justice to prevail entirely. He associated mercy with it. As they left, he said, "What a pity that Adam was not able to observe the command on him for even a brief period of time." To guard the entrance to paradise, God appointed the cherubim, called also the ever-turning sword of flames, because the angels can turn themselves from one shape into another at need. Instead of the tree of life, God gave Adam the Torah, which likewise is a tree of life to those that lay hold on her. And he was permitted to make his home just east of Eden. Having pronounced sentence on Adam, Eve, and the serpent, the Lord commanded the angels to turn the man and the woman out of paradise. Adam and Eve began to weep and supplicate bitterly, and the angels took pity on them and left the divine command unfulfilled until they could petition God to mitigate his severe verdict. But the Lord was adamant, saying, "Was it I that committed a trespass? Or did I pronounce a false judgment?" Also, Adam's prayer to be given the fruit of the tree of life was turned aside, with the promise, however, that if he would lead a pious life, he would be given the fruit on the day of resurrection, and he would then live forever. Seeing that God had resolved unalterably, Adam began to weep again and implored the angels to grant him at least permission to take sweet-scented spices with him out of paradise, so he might continue to bring offerings to God, and that his prayers be accepted before the Lord. The angels came before God and spoke, "Everlasting King, command us to give Adam sweet-scented spices of paradise." God heard their prayer. Thus Adam gathered saffron, nard, calamus, cinnamon, and all sorts of seeds besides. Laden with these, Adam and Eve left paradise and came to earth. They had enjoyed the splendors of paradise but a brief span of time, only a few hours. This eventful day was the first of the month of Tishri. God spoke to Adam, "You will be the prototype of your children. As you have been judged by me on this day and absolved, so your children, Israel, shall be judged by me on this New Year's Day, and they shall be absolved." Each day of creation brought forth three things. The first, heaven, earth, and light. The second, the firmament, Gehenna, and the angels. The third, trees, herbs, and paradise. The fourth, sun, moon, and stars. And the fifth, fishes, birds, and Leviathan. As God intended to rest on the seventh day, the Sabbath, day 6 had to do double duty. It brought forth 6 creations: Adam, Eve, cattle, reptiles, the beasts of the field, and demons. The demons were made shortly before the Sabbath came in, and they are bodiless spirits, because the Lord had no time to create bodies for them. In the twilight, between day 6 and the Sabbath, 10 creations were brought forth: the rainbow, invisible until Noah's time; manna, the water springs where Israel drew water for his thirst in the desert; the writing on the 2 tablets of stone, given at Sinai; the pen with which the writing was written; the 2 tables themselves; the mouth of Balaam's ass; the grave of Moses; the cave in which Moses and Elijah lived; and the rod of Aaron, with its blossoms and ripe almonds. Next, Sabbath in heaven. End Part 4 of 95, TheLegendsOfTheJews.com.